Hi everyone, I am Valerie Pringle. I am the spokesperson for the Canadian Foundation for AIDS Research, and really delighted to be here with you today with Dr. Bohdan Nosyk, who is, and I'll just get this all right, he's a PhD and associate professor at St. Paul's Hospital. He is also the CANFAR chair in HIV AIDS Research at the Faculty of Health Sciences at Simon Fraser University, and a number of other things and other serious awards. But those are the key things, I think. So welcome, Dr. Nosyk.
Thank you, Valerie. Yeah, the awards are sometimes serious. I'm often not, so we can keep it.
Okay, but they're impressive. They're impressive, and the work you do is impressive and interesting, and a little bit different than the kind of stuff we've talked about on some of these other conversations. So I'm just wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, and particularly your work and how you came to it.
Sure. I grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I attended the University of Winnipeg. I got interested in economics from a very early point in my academic career. Loved it. Gave me a better sense of how the world works. And I continued on in economics. I got into a health research group after graduating from my master's at UBC. And that really got me onto the path of healthcare. I wasn't exposed to much health before I got involved at St. Paul's Hospital. So a lot of this was learning on the job, but I always saw it as an area where there is a lot that needs to be said about healthcare from an economic standpoint. We spend a lot on it. We need to be absolutely efficient with how we do things. So I was really excited to get into health economics at a young age, and I've been sticking with it ever since. And, I came to HIV and substance use disorders because at St. Paul's, there were two major focal points for our hospital. That makes up a big chunk of our population that we see at the hospital, and they've always been hot button issues. And the people power was always needed there. And so I thought they were really fascinating, exciting populations to study. HIV is an interesting one, right? It's an epidemic, and it changes over time. And the way that we respond to it, it really depends on the state of the epidemic. So I think there's some really interesting things going on. And we've been very lucky, and I've been really grateful to have some great experience working on both provincial projects that have been going on in BC over the last 10 years, as well as some international work in the US and China. So it's been an interesting journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, CANFAR is very proud of you and proud to support your work. But I think there'd be people who would still sort of say, well, how does economic modeling solve the HIV epidemic?
Yeah, that's a very fair question. Most people probably don't think of the two things in the same domain. So, this is an infectious disease, and it's an epidemic that we have to track over time. And the way things work, the interventions that we have, be it testing or pre-exposure prophylaxis or getting people on treatment, the benefits of those things echo over many years. Okay, so diagnosing somebody early, giving them that knowledge, that changes their behavior, and it makes them less likely to transmit to another person. And that saved transmission, the benefits of that are seen long into the future. And so that's why you really need simulation modeling, right? Because it's our way of making decisions with a long timeline in mind. And you do need that long timeline in mind. Even now, even in the stage of the epidemic that we're in Canada, we're going to need a sustained push, and we need to make investment decisions that are forward-looking and are going to be durable over time, right? We need things that we can sustain and that we can say, this is a good investment. The challenge is we have to make the case for big front-loaded investments to do this, right? Self-testing is the latest that you're interested in. We need a big push now. To make that argument, the benefits of self-testing, we're going to be seeing those permeate through Canada for 20, 30 years, right? So we need to have that entire spectrum in mind, right?
And in your modeling, I mean, you can actually show the numbers, the cost to the healthcare system, et cetera, et cetera.
That's the idea. That is the idea. We're trying to make the best decision right now with what we know about the state of the epidemic, with how much things cost, how much life we can preserve. I mean, antiretroviral, that the progress we've made with antiretroviral therapy is staggering, right? The successes that we've seen in HIV are phenomenal. The danger now is that all that success is going to make people get complacent about this. And we can't do that. This is an infectious disease. If we take our foot off the gas, new infections will climb, right? The epidemic will grow again. So we really need to be thinking about a long-term, sustained strategy.
Well, complacency has happened,
Yeah.
Doctor.
Sadly.
I mean, people got, even before the antiretrovirals got as good as they are now, you know, as soon as there were antiretrovirals, and it wasn't necessarily, if you took meds or had meds, access to meds, the death sentence that it had been, people got complacent. So I don't know how you communicate that message to young people, particularly who seem to have picked up riskier habits, that you don't want this illness and you don't want to transmit it.
It's true. It's a tricky bit of messaging, right? Because we know now we have medications that can keep people alive. You can live a normal, healthy life so long as you stay on treatment, almost with a normal lifespan. Nevertheless, it's a big pill burden. It's not something you want to contract. So, and I hear you about the complacency setting in already. I think had we had a more aggressive push 10, 15 years ago, we'd be in a better place today. I don't think that's controversial at all. All we can do is work with what we've got now and make the most of it, and make the case strongly as we can that we still need to focus on HIV, and we still need to focus on driving down the epidemic wherever we can.
Well, it's interesting. You wrote a piece with some other people in a research journal using the COVID-19 tracking example to talk about ending the HIV epidemic, saying that this COVID situation provided an unprecedented opportunity to end the HIV epidemic in North America.
Yeah, and I think it still does. So the premise was, once COVID hit, we knew right away this is going to be problematic, right? There are disruptions in the healthcare system. People might not be picking up their medications. People might not be getting their prevention meds. The system may be overwhelmed with COVID testing. We felt it was important to get testing back on the front burner. And we've already seen testing rates drop precipitously over the last year. Basically, the premise is, if we're seeing people already, and if we're collecting samples from them, be it oral samples, blood samples, we need to be making the most of that opportunity in testing for HIV, Hep C, A1C testing. It's a rare opportunity right now to reach a broader swath of the population than we usually see, right? It's an unprecedented opportunity to reach people that we normally don't reach. Now, the reality has been with testing, as we've all seen, it's been totally overwhelmed, right? Aside from just the planning and the logistics of setting up mass testing facilities, people are just overwhelmed. Labs are overwhelmed. So it hasn't worked with testing, but I'm seeing it already work with vaccination. So we've had some great conversations with colleagues in Baltimore and other locations that we're working with. And we're already seeing HIV testing, Hep C testing being used alongside vaccination to promote vaccine uptake. And with vaccination, we've got a longer runway here, right? We've done a lot in Canada already. The US is further behind. There are opportunities to reach out to a greater population base here and do more testing than we've ever done before. And we're going to have more opportunities. There are going to be booster doses. And so it's all about this idea of, taking the opportunities that we can to reach people. And, aside from just the scale, right? This is all about scale and getting more of it done. There are some major efficiencies to be gained. If we can lump together a few different tests, a few different prevention interventions in that single visit, that could save a lot of money. And saving money, making things efficient, making things sustainable, that's a big part of it. I've said it before, tying HIV testing to testing for other sexually transmitted and bloodborne infections, we need to be considering different strategies to do this jointly in a combined way, to reach a broader population and have an investment that we can support over a sustained period.
As you point out, with COVID, so many more of us were in contact with the public health system. But I'm wondering, if you were saying to someone, hi, you're getting your vaccination, or you're getting a COVID test, do you mind if we test you for a bunch of other things? If they'd say, no, I can only deal with one thing at a time, COVID's enough.
And that's perfectly reasonable. And we see that, in the provincial Stop HIV/AIDS program, we rolled out testing at acute care settings. So anybody presenting to hospital, we want to confirm that they were HIV negative, right? And that's how it was posed. And sometimes people say no to that, and that's their prerogative. We know that sort of forcing this on people doesn't work, and it's not the right thing to do anyway. But we need to be taking the opportunities that we can, is the point, right? And offering it wherever we can, making it as accessible as we can make it.
Well, the battle in Canada to get self-testing kits, approved was, I will say, ridiculously and embarrassingly long. But they're here.
I hear that. Yeah.
But they are here, and this is good. Again, in terms of just partly what I referred to, the privacy thing and the comfort people have, do you think that self-testing kits will make that big a difference, or are we just going to have to do a huge push to get them into the communities that we know need them, because the HIV infection rates are higher in certain communities and certain Indigenous populations, et cetera, where the rates are higher?
Yeah, I think it's a valuable tool. I will say, though, that thinking of a detailed implementation strategy is going to be every bit as important as the actual technology itself, right? Who needs these tests? Do they know about it? Do prescribers and other frontline workers know about it? How are they promoting this? Are they in favor of promoting this? What does it take for people to access them? If it's ordered online, it'd be a lot better if you could pick it up at a local pharmacy, right? And some people, just making it available will not be enough. We have to be more active in getting these tests out to the people that need them most. So thinking about implementation is going to be really crucial in all of this. But we have a great surveillance system. We know about who is presenting late to the system, right? Who is being diagnosed with CD4s under 200. We have a good idea of what that population looks like, and we know where we need to target our attention. So, this needs an effort. This needs a renewed focus. And I think, the bandwidth, the capacity of the system to do this is going to be greatly improved as we slowly, but hopefully surely, put COVID in our rearview mirror here.
Right. How can we get HIV infections down? How do we reach the communities? We've sort of talked around this to reach the communities we need to reach.
Yeah, I think this comes down to people more than anything, right? The biomedical interventions, they're fantastic. They are better. We have a better, broader set of tools to fight this epidemic than we've ever had, than a lot of other disease areas have. And so now it's really about, how do we get it to the people that need it most? And I think, we talk about dollars and cents, but it's really people. That is our biggest challenge, finding enough people to do contact tracing, to do outreach, to do community outreach. It's working with communities. it's really getting the word out and ensuring, like I say, that the people that need it most actually access it. So to me, all signs point to the number of people that we have on this topic focusing on this issue.
Yeah, well, would it make a difference, even though health, as we know, is a provincial responsibility, but when you're sort of mobilizing and trying to set a goal to end HIV infections in this country, would it help to, we're a country without a national AIDS strategy.
Yeah.
No goal.
Yeah, I mean, that's been a chronic problem. I think everybody recognizes it. Certainly out here, everybody recognizes it. The guidance that we're getting, at least from CIHR, I think it's reasonable, right? I think we need to be thinking about HIV as one part of our response to sexually transmitted and bloodborne infections. And I think, that is going to be a way to not only scale out some of the things that we're doing, like testing, but it's going to give us a better chance of having a sustained response in HIV, right? If you ask me, I mean, we need to be spending on this still because there's still a lot of value to do that. But it gets harder and harder to make the value argument as the size of the epidemic shrinks. Okay, so testing is really, really valuable. PrEP is really, really valuable in settings where there's a large undiagnosed, unsuppressed population. As that population dwindles, you are preventing fewer and fewer infections. So you have to be that much more targeted and that much more careful with every dollar that you spend, every person that you assign to the response. So I think that's sort of bigger picture thinking about this. That's what's going to allow us to sustain a response. Because it's not going to happen overnight, and there's no silver bullet for this.
You're right. Just like door by door by door by door, as they've ended other epidemics around the world almost, by the end. And I'm wondering, though, if you think, man, sometime maybe you won't even have to do modeling charts for HIV.
I hope so. I hope we run ourselves out of business. That would be fantastic news. I think that's wishful thinking. I don't think we should think of this as something that is going to go away after one big push on that one last intervention. We need to think of it as, part of a broader strategy that we need to continue to focus on, continue to sustain long into the future.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us and explaining this modeling and what you do. It's really interesting to think about, and especially the tie-ins with COVID. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm glad at least you think it's interesting. So that's great. Modeling usually kind of goes over people's heads, but it is important. It's going to be used to support decision-making more and more. And, especially in the case of HIV, it's needed. So let's hope we can keep the momentum going and keep a sustained focus on HIV into the future.
Thanks, Dr. Nosyk.
My pleasure.